Okay, you're back to the conversation. Let's talk a little bit about the oil market. We're checking in this Friday. Crude oil, Brent's slightly above 70 right now. We were slightly at the doorstep of 73 yesterday. Now we're heading towards 74, down very slightly around 1700 GMT. 71.75 for the US WTI. The nat gas crossed to $4.04, and RBOB gasoline down sharply by 1.21%. Let's take you straight to the metals market, where gold has been, now it's likely going to lose that 1800 before Monday. There are the spot markets, because investors are a lot more aggressive right now on risky assets, such as stocks with the earnings coming from around the world, Twitter, the banks, and everyone else. Then you have silver down by 96 basis points. Copper is up by 62. Platinum down sharply by 3.4, and aluminum 1.20% at 1700. Keep that in mind. Let me check in with the Southern African market. The GSC still in a green territory, crossed 68 by 98 basis points. Lusaka was down by 16. Botswana remained flat in Gaborone. The markets in Harare, the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange, that's your all share index, up by 21 basis points, 66.18, and 1921.14, 1921, slightly up in Mauritius, on the island of the Indian Ocean. What's in the news? Very quickly, Vodacom reporting revenue up 9% to 24.8 billion rand in its own first quarter 2022 period. Telkom shares slipped today on the GSE because of the news that a CEO is stepping down next June. And Angola is proposing 230.5 export tax curb to curb smuggling. And we are getting the first batch of our J&J's 400 million vaccines next week. Get ready. I'm getting my jab. But we're getting something ready off today. We're right back. It's the Olympics. Yes, the Olympics is the greatest games event in the world, with its roots way back in ancient Greece, when the various city-states sent athletes to the festival of games, which were held to honor the gods. Fast forward more than 2,000 years after, and you find yourself in Tokyo, where the 2020 Olympics Games is kicking off, even with the cloud of the virus pandemic hanging over the games. But beyond the festival of games that the Olympics is known for, what are the economics of this great event? And why does it attract less dollar returns like the European Premier League? All right, sports correspondent Aaron Akerejola is here with me to mix sports with business. Tonight, let's get some games. It's good to have you.
It's good to be here today.
Great.
Making my debut on the show.
Oh, great. And on a very big event such as the Olympics.
Yes, it is.
What costs are generally involved in the planning of the Olympics?
It takes a lot. It takes a lot. And the point is this. Usually, first of all, let's put it in perspective. Putting together a host bid is a lot. Now, let's put it in perspective. When Tokyo tried to bid previously for the 2016 games that was held in Rio, it cost them 150 million to put up the elaborate bid just to get...
That goes to the Olympic Committee?
Yes, straight up. And as a matter of fact, Toronto said at a certain time that 60 million was too rich for them to actually afford to put in a bid. So they just actually pulled out, because you have to call in planners, developers. It takes a lot. It takes almost like a village.
So the Olympics planning and bidding, it's a show.
Yes, it is a show. And that they've accused the IOC of making it too flamboyant, too elaborate, that it's almost setting the host cities back by millions, if not billions of dollars.
Like a big wedding party.
I tell you. Or like a Nigerian party. We like to do it big.
The Nigerian party. Yeah, to choose the bride and the groom.
Yes. Now, initially, when they actually won the bid, talking about Tokyo, they estimated that it was going to cost them 7.3 billion to actually host the Olympics. They revised that particular figure to 12.6, and at a certain time, they pegged it at 22 billion. But Nikkei and Asahi talking about, they did some forensic auditing and said, no, it's actually going to cost Beijing, it's going to cost Tokyo 28 billion to host this Olympics.
28
billion.
Who bear this cost?
It's the host city and the country. Now let's put it into
perspective. 28 billion US dollars. Nigeria's total foreign reserves right now is 33. If we bid
now it cost Japan 2.6 billion to postpone the games from 2020 to 2021. And that is why they've been insisting that they will hold these games, because it will cost them an arm and a leg. And just imagine not having the games hold. It's almost like sinking the ship. This is not a white elephant project. This is a very expensive white elephant project if you don't have the games hold. So they've insisted, come rain, come shine, they will hold the games.
But we have, what are the economics of these games, by the way? How do you host it successful? Give me one or two of those who've hosted it successfully.
I think till date, the only...
Well, when I say successfully,
yes,
I mean in terms of
money.
this.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Now, the only city to have hosted successfully and gotten profits out of it was back in 1984, Los Angeles. Now, building up to 1984,
I remember that.
In 79, when the bids were thrown open, Los Angeles were the only city in the race, so they could actually determine their terms, and they negotiated their terms with the IOC. And that meant that they could actually get some incentives, and also television rights played a huge chunk, because like we actually saw when it comes to what you get or where the revenues come from the Olympics.
Yes.
Television right plays a huge lot, although the IOC takes a chunk of it, but certainly you get to see
looking
that.
at the broadcast revenue. We'll get to that a little bit. We'll get to that in a minute. You're talking about the Los Angeles Olympics.
Yes.
I want you to finish that, because Los Angeles by itself is a city everyone would want to visit.
Yes, and tourism was up heavily also. It's not been like that for every other city that's hosted, because Barcelona benefited heavily from tourism, but Beijing did not benefit heavily from tourism.
But Atlanta should have benefited.
Atlanta, slightly, not as much, but Los Angeles did. So when you put all this together, that meant that they actually recorded profits in the tune of about $261 million. And that was a rarity, because between then, 1984, and now, we don't have any city hosting the Olympics who can beat their chest and say we made profits.
Not even London?
Not even London. London was actually where I think they had actually. When you look at the figures, I think I actually have the figures when it comes to what happened in London, because they were.
I'm looking at the screen right now.
Yes,
that's in 2012.
Yeah, so you can actually see that it cost them 15 billion to actually host the Olympics, and if you look at that, if you'd ask me, it was 76% over budget at 15 billion. When you're over budget, most of the Olympics actually goes over budget. When it's over budget, how do you make profit from that? Because unforeseen circumstances, and the fact that the IOC would always insist that you, for example, have as much as 30,000 hotel rooms available. You need to engage in massive projects, stadiums that might not be used, and that is the biggest problem. The fact that
I'm talking about South Africa.
So South Africa. So we're talking about we're talking about, for example, Beijing. For example, they built a massive edifice. It cost them 10 million every year to maintain that particular edifice, and it is rarely used. It is sparsely used. When you have that in the book, Salt Lake City, for example, hosting another Olympics, you find that you have big structures that are not suited to the daily use, and these countries just end up pouring in monies to ensure they maintain this facility. So it's very difficult.
I'm going to have one final question, but we're not yet there. So I'm just reserving that. Are Olympics economically viable as the EPL? Looks like the round letter game seems to be the game. So
now the truth is this. The EPL has been able to crack a code, the financial code. And that was because they were able to probably adopt a system from the United States of America. The American sports model, they brought it in, took it a little bit, ensured they put in a lot of marketing drive and publicity drive behind it.
For the Premier League.
For the Premier League. And it's been a resounding success. But the Olympics is not as popular because the Olympics is not just one sport. It is areas of sports. For example, 50 disciplines are what are available right now at this present Olympics, spread across 33 sports. So,
But you have more countries participating.
more countries participating means that you're having people, more unknown players, more unknown athletes, more unknown would-be stars. Because the question now is this: how much do these people even take home? Most of them, when you look at the pay package, you will weep, because it's not as glamorous as it sounds.
I know on this side of the Atlantic, most of our folks here watch the Olympics because of the football part of it.
Yes, football is actually a huge driver for the Olympics. People, the IOC also knows that, and they try to keep it that way, because football will certainly have stadiums full. Now, just imagine how devastating and how debilitating it will be for the organizers of this Tokyo Games not having ticket sales, box office sales right now, because not just for football, for other events. Now, football, look at track and field, for example, is the creme de la creme when it comes to the Olympics.
I love track and field.
Then football, because the 100 meters race is one of the most watched events. That's 5, 7, 8, 9, 10 seconds, depending on who is running, is a very, very coveted slot time.
Yes.
So that's then probably football actually brings in the biggest eyeballs going to the Olympics. Not having people at the stadium, first of all, to watch this will be a massive loss for them. Then they will be hoping that the numbers actually go up. But with the protestation in Japan, will people be watching?
Or about the advertisers' monies and sponsorships?
That is also huge. But their biggest money pool regarding the Olympics still comes from television rights. Not as much as other places.
Not the tickets.
Tickets probably falls.
Ticket sales.
Probably third. First of all, it's the huge chunk. 45% of their monies come from television. Then the rest is spread across tickets, then advertising, then some others actually come into play. But that television right is where their bread and butter is.
When you look at the origin of the Olympics, it's all about the Greeks coming in to compete in the games. But it looks like over the centuries and over the years, you've had football take a life of its own away and out of the Olympics. Now, are Olympics still relevant today as a festival of games? Is it still relevant?
It is relevant, but it's becoming a very, very expensive, relevant sport. And if they do not tweak their system to ensure it actually matches up with the times, it will become obsolete over time. So they need
because I'm going to think that way.
Because first of all, the fact that the Olympics has several sports now. The beauty about the Olympics and the host city is the fact that you can decide the kind of games that will be included into the Olympic into the event. So you can decide that skateboarding is what we like in our city. We want to put skateboarding in, and how viable is skateboarding globally? What's the global pool in terms of people that like to watch people skateboard? Things like that.
I'm just thinking about whether this game is still very relevant in today's world.
It is still relevant because it's still
Swimming,
it's still the biggest pinnacle of sports. But when it comes to the
EPL,
when it comes to the television, no. Well, now let me clarify this. It is the biggest pinnacle of sports in terms of participation. But when it comes to popularity, football takes the huge cake.
I got it. My director is saying 15 seconds. Okay. Let's leave it there for tonight. You keep your eye on the Olympics. I'll keep eye on the money side of things. Aaron Akerejola, Arise Sports Correspondent, live here on Arise Exchange.